What is international trade? So the buying and selling of goods and services between businesses in several nations is referred to as international trade. So on the global market, commodities such as consumer products, raw materials, food, and machinery are all purchased and sold. So through commerce, nations can access commodities and services that might not otherwise be accessible domestically and grow their markets. So market competition has increased as a result of global trade. So this ultimately leads to more competitive pricing, which lowers the cost of the final product for the consumer.
International trade consists of imports and exports. So, imports are the products and services that a company or customer buys from another nation, while exports are the products and services that a country exports to businesses or customers abroad.
So what is political crisis? So a problem or disagreement in a government's operation that is thought to be intractable by the political constitution or another fundamental governing law. So when the economy improves, it is referred to as economic growth, and when it declines, it is referred to as economic contraction or downturn.
What is gross domestic product, GDP? GDP is the entire worth of all goods and services a country produces over a specific time period, often known as its national income. So, due to its ability to show whether economy is expanding or going through a recession, GDP is one of the most popular indicators used to monitor a country's economic health. There are three types of GDP, which are nominal GDP, real GDP, and actual GDP. Nominal GDP is the total cost of all manufactured goods and services at the going rate. Both inflation and deflation are included, while real GDP is the GDP adjusted for inflation based on the value of all goods and services at a base price. Actual GDP is the measurement in real time or over a defined time period, reveals the current state of the economy. So, how to calculate GDP? GDP, the formula of GDP is GDP equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. C is the consumer expenditure, I is the investment expenditure, G is the government spending, while X minus M is net exports. So there are three methods to calculate GDP, which are expenditure approach, income approach, and production or value added approach. So to calculate net export, the formula is net export equal to total exports minus total imports. If the value of net export are positive, so it is the trade surplus. While when the value is negative, so it is trade deficit.
Next, I will be talking about the Ukraine's import, exports, as well as the GDP from the year 1990 to the year 2022. So it starts off with the Ukraine's GDP from the year 1990 to the year 2000. So the trend of trade in Ukraine were in deficit from 1990 to the year 1993 at an increasing rate and worsened from 1993 to 1994, whereby the GDP rate worsened and went down from negative 14.2% to negative 22.9%. And so this is happening due to the lack of exports happening in Ukraine, but the imports are still going on. This is definitely unfavorable for the country since their domestic businesses does not gain any experiences in order to make value-added products. However, the GDP improved to be in trade surplus from the year 1995 to the year 2000, all the way from negative 22.9% to 5.9%, when the Ukraine slowly starts to export their products more to other countries like Russia, Poland, and China being some of the highest trade. Next, for the Ukraine's import and exports from the year 1990 to 2000. Ukraine exports started low in 1990, but increased to be higher than the import from 1991 to 1992, which means the country is still in trade surplus. However, during 1993, the import rate rise until 1995 at an increasing rate, but continues to be higher than the export rate at a decreasing rate to fix the trade deficit. And so Ukraine managed to fix their trade deficit into a trade surplus between 1998 and 1999 and further increased the export until the year 2000. And so this directly impacts Ukraine's exchange rate to be higher when they export more of their products. Next is the Ukraine's import and export trend from the year 1990 to 2000. After Ukraine's independence in 1991 from the Soviet Union, we can see that Ukraine slowly worked their way up without a sustainable foundation. And so some of the top products that were imported into Ukraine from the year 1991 until the year 2000 were consumer goods, fuels, capital goods, intermediate goods, as well as the raw materials. And in 1996, you can see that Ukraine's import peaked at 9.2 billion of consumer goods, and the least imported goods is hides and skin in the year 1999, which are the hides and skin at $42.3 thousand. So for exports, on the other hand, we can see that Ukraine had the highest amount of exports for intermediate goods, which is at $8.4 billion in the year 2000, and had its lowest export of footwear in 1999 for only $59.7 thousand.
Next, Ukraine GDP from 2000 until 2010. The GDP annual growth recorded in 2004 was the highest among those 10 years, which is 11.8%, because at that moment the economy is stable, so exports and imports activities are actively done. But in 2005, the percentage dropped to 3.1%, and it was increased back in 2007, which is 8.2%. Next, the lowest percentage of GDP recorded in 2009, which is negative 15.1%, but in 2010 the percentage was spiked to 4.1%. Next, Ukraine imports from 2000 until 2010. In 2000, the percentage of imports for goods and services was 55.4%, which is the highest among those 10 years. But in 2002, there was a significant trade drop, so the percentage is 45.9%. Then, the percentage increased to 51.3% in 2004, but the percentage remained dropped until 2006. In 2007, there is a small increase in the percentage, which is 0.8%, and the graph simultaneously dropped and spiked until 2010. The percentage was remained 49.3%. Ukraine exports from 2000 until 2010. The highest percentage of exports of goods and services in 2000, which is 60.3%, but it faced a huge drop in 2002, so the percentage is 50.1%. Then, the exports spiked to 58.7% in 2004. However, the unstable economy has made the percentage drop again until 2007. The percentage in 2007 was 41.3%, which is the lowest among those 10 years. Lastly, in 2010, the economy was recovered. Then the percentage increased to 46.5%. Next, Ukraine's import and export trend from 2000 until 2010. Although 1990 to 2000 were considered underachieving, however, the government has since stabilized its foreign trade. In 2000, metals and minerals are accounted for half of Ukraine's exports. Some of the most involved goods during the year 2000 to 2010 trades remain the same as the ones from 1990 to 2000. For imports, the year 2008 has shown to bring the highest value of imports for consumer goods, which was at 36.6 billions, and their lowest imports of footwear, which is valued at 32.2 Ks in the year 2000. Next, the Ukraine government has exported a significant 37.1 billions of intermediate goods in 2008, and also had footwear as the lowest exported goods, which was 69.1 Ks in the year 2000.
Then, we will move on with Ukraine's GDP from year 2010 until 2022. So, started from 2010, the graph decreased drastically until 2015 because of the unstable economy. However, the graph rise back, but then decreased in 2020 because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And surprisingly, after that, the graph started to increase back in the year 2021 and 2022, showing that the economy in Ukraine is started to get better. Based on the graph of Ukraine imports and exports from 2011 to 2021, the percentage of GDP imports increased and decreased back from the year 2010 to 2021 for exports. First, the percentage of GDP in 2010 increased, but from 2011 to 2013, this percentage began to decrease. But from the year 2013 to 2016, the percentage started to increase back. Subsequently, the percentage decreased from 2016 to 2020 because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but then it increased back from 2020 to 2021. So for export percentage, from 2010 to 2015, the graph was seen in 2011 and the decrease in 2012 and 2013. However, the graph increases back from 2015 until 2021 and then decrease, but return to increase by 2021. Next, I'll be talking about Ukraine's import and export trend in the year 2022. So in terms of GDP, Ukraine was the 55th largest economy in the world in 2020. So in terms of exports, imports and GDP per capita, Ukraine ranks 132 overall and 46 in both categories. So refined petroleums is Ukraine's largest import in 2020, amounting to $1.59 billion, followed by automobiles, packaged drugs, petroleum gas, and coal briquettes. So with a total import of $7.2 billion, the majority of it goes to China, followed by Poland, Russia, Turkey, and Egypt. So this demonstrates that Ukraine's exports to a number of nations in order to boost its export commerce during that year, rather than just one.
So, next slide, I will continue to the impacts of COVID-19. First, to international trade in Ukraine. So, the international trade, there is impact on COVID-19 on the Ukraine is trade volumes, freight type and value. And trade volumes were all impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. For instance, as the result of the worldwide sanitary crisis, the value to weight ratio of airborne commerce, this is a measure in local currency per ton, grew significantly for exports from EU 27. The ratio for all exports climbed by 38% between February and April 2020, reaching an all-time high. Due to restrictions on commercial flights and port operation as well as the quarantine measure put in place by many countries over the past 2 years, there have been variation in value to weight ratio for international freight. So these variation are reflection of the rise in production and transportation costs. For the transportation cost. So this is a figure for the impact on the international trade. So next slide, I will continue to impact of COVID-19 to import and export in Ukraine. Firstly, in the EU 27 and the US, sea freight volumes are fully restored to February 2020 levels prior to the epidemic in September 2021. In terms of tonnage, US seaborne export increased dramatically in Q4 2021 and the first 5 months of 2022. As a result, trade volume in May 2022 were 10% greater than they were prior to the pandemic. However, during the first quarter of 2022, US imports by sea stagnate by May 2022. So they were still at the pre-pandemic levels. In contrast, import rose while export by sea from EU 27 start to decline in May 2021. So next, export by sea from EU 27 were 5% lower and import were 7% higher in May 2022 compared to February 2020. Furthermore, when the COVID-19 pandemic began, so this is the impact of COVID-19 into import and export at Ukraine. So the next slide, the impact COVID-19 to the GDP on in Ukraine. Firstly, GDP in current dollars grew by 4.1%. However, the impact of COVID-19 on Ukraine's GDP was a 5 to 10% decline. The Ukraine Institute for the Future has created its own analysis of the potential economic impact to the pandemic. Depending on how long the quarantine lasts and how much economic activity is affected, the study state that the GDP decline might be between 5 and 10%, some of which may simply be deferred. The length of the quarantine will also have an impact on the pandemic's consequence on the economy. So the soft quarantine is currently set to last until April, but officially have indicated that it may be extended for at least 1 more month. After that, GDP growth will be determined by a lag in renew production and consumption. So this is a impact of COVID-19 to the GDP on Ukraine. That's all from me.